Okay, it is 10 p.m. and all 10 a.m. Did I say p.m.? That's 10 a.m. On August 24th, 2023. Good morning. And I will call to order the Board of Directors of the Denton County Transportation Authority. And first item is the invocation. Alternate Pat Smith will do it.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to come together this morning. Pray for our nation, our state, our respective communities, that you give us wisdom and discernment as we continue to serve the citizens that we've sworn and we've been led to support and care for. Thank you for the men and women around this table and on the staff for out driving buses and driving trains, driving vans, for their servant's heart, that you give us wisdom and discernment. Thank you for the opportunity we have to serve you in your son's name.
Amen. Now be joined for the Pledge of Allegiance. First United States. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The Texas flag, pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Introductions. Do we have any introductions, Mr. CEO?
I have no introductions today, sir.
And none from our directors. We'll move on next to public comments. I have two cards that have been issued. Let me go through this. This agenda item provides an opportunity for the citizens to address the Denton County Board of Directors on any agenda items or other matters related to DCTA. The speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. Citizens that are not able to participate in person must email his or her comments to kmorrisperkins@dcta.net no later than 3 p.m. on Wednesday, August 23rd, 2023 to ensure that comments will be distributed to the board members prior to the meeting. Lisa, do we have any written comments? Okay. In that case, let me go to the two speakers today. The first speaker is Liam Game Wakefield. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
It's okay. It's Gone Wakefield, but
Gone Wakefield. Thank you. I apologize, sir.
okay.
You want to use the microphone?
Hello, my name is Liam. I'm out here today to talk about something that would help increase my usage of the DCTA system. It's adding, it's like a bus Sunday service, like the Go Zone. There is, like Go Zone has Sunday service, but the bus doesn't. I know that the A train doesn't have Sunday service because of maintenance on the tracks, but I find if there was buses on Sunday, more people would be able to use them to get charged, get groceries, and just be another time slot where people can slide in to use it when they need to. Where maybe they don't have time during the weekday or Saturday. So, and another thing on the Sunday service, because I know there's not an A train service. So whenever I go down to Dart on Saturday and I try to come back up Sunday, I get stuck at Trinity Mills and the Go Zone doesn't go up. And there's no buses picking up. I think a good solution until the A train gets double tracked in how many years would be to have a bus line that goes between the different stations to drop people off in Trinity Mills, so they can not have to worry about either coming back Monday morning or not taking the DCTA at all, the A train at all, because they'll just get stuck down in Dallas Sunday. And I was able to write SEPTA fairly recently, and I have to say, like, it was all wide agency, but I will say that DCTA does a good job of making sure that one, it's easy to pay and ride DCTA, because like instead of their ticket, the ticket I get didn't cover like buses or other trains. So I appreciate that DCTA does a good job of making it. Thank you, Thank you, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Christine Ray.
Hello, y'all. So I started attending UTD again this fall. So I'm happy to say that I'm getting to ride the A train twice a week in order to make it down to my classes. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. There's days where just because of the time I have to drive down there, but on those days I don't get to do my homework on the way there. I don't get to like listen to podcasts or talk to people. But I do have something to make you aware of. My roommate is also starting college. They're going to Collin because that's one of the few colleges in the metro that offers sign language interpretation as a degree. And so they rode the A train with me on Tuesday, and then their last class lets out at 9. They had meticulously looked over all of the timetables for both DART as well as DCTA, and they had looked at the timetable for the A train, and I would invite you all to pull this up on your devices right now. And they looked at the Monday through Friday schedule, where it says that there is a 10 p.m. outbound train from Trinity Mills up north. And then that block is slightly highlighted, and there's a little amendment down beneath it that says Friday service only. So they did not notice that, nor did 3 other students who were all relying on the A train to get home that day. And so I wound up getting a call at 10. They were like, hey, there's no train. What's going on? Why isn't there a train? I drove down and I picked up 4 different people who were all hoping that there would be a train service at that time. So as a short-term fix, obviously, I think graphic design could just be a little bit clearer, be updated. And then as a longer-term fix, you know, there should be later service hours on these services. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. That concludes the public comments. The next is consent agenda. We have one item under consent agenda, consider approval of regular meeting minutes. Is there any direction, action from the board on the consent
Motion
agenda?
to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we'll go to our regular agenda. First agenda is conduct a public hearing, consider approval of a resolution to adopt the proposed Netton County Transportation Authority fiscal year 2024 operating and capital budget, long-range financial plans, and budget contingency plan beginning October 1st, 2023 and ending September 30th, 2024. Ms. Sherrill.
Good morning, board and members of the community. My name is Sherrill Evans-Jones. I'm the Chief Financial Officer with DCTA. Pleased to be here with you today. Since this matter relates to a public hearing, what we wanted to do is allow some time for any public comments if anyone is signed up to speak, and then thereafter we can run through our slides, and that may give us an opportunity to speak to any particular points that might be raised at this point. So my question is there anyone signed up to speak in a public hearing setting on this matter, or how do we want to handle that? Do we open it to the public to?
I think should be making on the open the public hearing. So I'll open the public hearing for any public comments at this time.
You just show the public hearing was open at 10:09.
The public hearing was open at 10:09 a.m. for the record. And is there anyone that would like to speak? Okay.
There we go.
Hello again. I just wanted to say I'm excited to see some of the movements that DCTA is doing with regards to the B train. Well, that's what I'm calling it. I don't know if it has an official name. As well as improvements to the A train. I would of course like to see more improvement on the buses. If you don't have a car, the bus is how you get to the A train or any other trains that DCTA might deploy. And it's how we move most of our people, right? Our bus service ridership is much higher than our A train ridership. I think there's a lot of opportunity, as you know, witnessed by the Go Zone data that's showing us where are people trying to get to, where are people trying to get from. And I would just really like to see moving forward, this agency begin to use that data, not just to boost frequency on some corridors, which is great. I love the movement towards increasing the frequency in that one kind of UNT to Southeast Denton corridor. But also just to add service in Louisville, in Denton, and anywhere else where it might be needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 10:11 a.m. And we turn it back to Mrs. Evans Jones.
Thank you. I just have some brief comments and I'll be joined by our Senior Manager of Budget, Jane Florowitz. As she comes forward, I just wanted to note before we get into the specific slides that have been prepared, that the notice of the public hearing was published in the Denton Record Chronicle on August 9th and 10th, notifying of the public hearing that was to occur today and the potential adoption of the budget, which is slated for adoption today. So I just wanted to make note of that before we move forward with the slides. Good morning. I'm Jane Florowitz, the Senior Manager of Budget, and I'm just today going to give you a kind of broad overview of the numbers of the budget. Nothing has changed since we last met in July, but it'll just get a bit of a reminder and then a high-level overview, like I said. I'll probably go through the slides relatively quickly, but by all means, stop me if you have a question, or at the end, I'll hold for questions as well. But right here, you're looking at the DCTA budget summary. The operating budget for FY24 will be $50.2 million. The proposed capital is $35.7 million, and then debt service comes in just below $2 million at 1.9. This is the change in net position for DCTA. This does include DCTA and NTMC. It is net depreciation. Operating revenues is $7.4 million, and then we break them out into 4 categories. So general administration and expenses is $9.6 million. The bus operations is 11.5. Mobility services 11.9 and rail operations at 17, again at that 50.2 total operating expenses. Our total non-operating revenue and expenses is 68.6 million, and our transfer, which is the MTMC, is $7 million. This is the DCTA statement of revenue and expenditures. All the numbers that are on this page are very similar to the ones that was on the prior slide. However, this particular slide does include depreciation, and it rolls everything up to revenues and expenses. Our next slide is going to be the 2 slides. This is the DCTA organizational structure. The next one will be NTMC. The blue boxes on this slide are current positions. The gray boxes are new positions for FY24. There's 7 new positions that we're proposing. 6 of those are coordinator positions to help out with various departments at an entry-level position on administrative tasks. And the other is a planning and development analyst. That gives us a total of 43 positions for DCTA for FY24. And then for NTMC, there's no change from the FY23 working budget. It's 95 positions for the working budget this year. It'll be 95 positions as well for next year. So no new positions are requested this time for NTMC. These are the ELPs. And so we have 5 capital ELPs. Some of the larger ones are the electronic security and digital passenger signage at 1.5 million, and the rail maintenance of 2.4 million. We also have 3 operating. We reduced executive coaching to 40,000, and we increased the third-party advertising to 250,000. Our ELPs for FY24 total $4.8 million. The capital budget hasn't changed from when you saw it last. It does total out at $35.7 million. Some of the largest dollar projects that are on these 2 slides here are the ELPs for 4.5 million. That's the capital ELPs. The ERP rollover that was scheduled for this year that we've moved funding to the next 2 years, but for the FY24, it's 1.6 million, and then positive train control at 3.4 million. This is just the second slide, and that shows you the total at the bottom, if you can see that. This is our 4-year outlook. So our total revenues are 76.2 million. Our total expenses near the bottom there, 74.1. The main items of a dollar value on this one are the federal grants at 16.8 million.
the sales tax at 40 million, and then operating expenses again at 50.2. The long-range financial plan is very hard to see that, but you do have it at your space as well. Again, no changes from the July, but that we wanted you to be able to have this as well, since this is something that if we approve the budget today, we'd be approving this along with the budget and the budget contingency plan. Are there any questions on the overall FY24 budget?
Any questions, staff? There you go.
Well, I just want to know one thing. Sorry, just one thing. This is, worth just making sure that we are clear on it. ELPs, for instance, one ELP in particular is a multi-year ELP. That first one, the electronic data security, that's the one that we talked about. That will be a multiple year item. What you're technically doing is approving the spending for FY24. But we want to be transparent with you and say that it's 1.5 million for FY24. But as Javier and that team go forward with doing RFPs, they're going to scope this thing out for, can I do it? Yeah. So they're going to scope it out for the full 4-year project, you see, as it has been discussed and explained to the team. So that one in particular, typically what we're doing is we're approving 1 year at a time, but in order to do these multi-year things, you have to scope it out and you have to work an RFP that covers multiple years in order to fulfill how we described it to you, okay? So that's just.
So that would just mean that once you scope it out and you have the cost, that's gonna be built into the next year's
Future,
budget.
that's right.
Good.
That's right. Typically, what you're doing on a capital thing is you're saying, and another example of that is the ERP. We will scope it out, but it will cover multiple years. Technically, what you're doing is you're saying, I approve of 2024, but we are doing things to make cost and expenditure into 2025 and beyond from multiple year type projects. So I just wanted to kind of draw that distinction and as in the spirit of disclosure. Okay,
Great.
that's all I had to say.
All right. This is an action item. So any further discussion on this item? Anybody on the board?
I move approval of the resolution.
Have a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Otherwise, I'll take the vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
One more thing. Thank yous. Thank yous to the departments, the staff that pulled together a lot of data very quickly. Our leadership team for its stewardship of this process, members of the public for continuing to poke and ask questions and is this right, and helping us to sharpen those numbers. Thank you to the board. Thank you for a lot of thought and heartfelt discussions around making sure that we're moving in the right direction. And to Ms. Jane Pilarowitz and Paul Christina. These two have done a lot of work to make sure that we were able to get the ball over the goal line. So I just want to say a huge thank you.
Thank you, Sherelle.
Thank you all.
Yes,
Appreciate
I'd
it.
like to thank staff because to think what y'all took over in a short period of time. I mean, most of y'all haven't even been here a year. And I think you've delivered what the public and what this board has wanted. And for me, a lot of it is always transparency, and thank you for addressing those things. I think the more we educate our constituents, the more accepting they are of what we're doing. And thank you for your professionalism and all the hard work. I know, I look at all these new faces and I'm like, I don't know how they did this. With God's help, I'm sure. And thank y'all so much for making it easier for the board and for those following DCTA. We're number one.
Amen.
Judge.
Sure, I'd like to echo Mayor Costa's comments and thank y'all for delivering a great work product, and it's very transparent, as you referenced, and it's easy to understand, not only for the board to make decisions off of with the public. And I appreciate the public comments. I appreciate those watching and those in attendance today. And so, and yes, being new to the agency, but not new to government. Jane and I've worked together before, so I want to say that she came well trained. I'm going to say that from the county. So I'm glad you're here. Sherelle, thank you. And the whole team and Paul, kudos for assembling such a great power team. And so thank you all for your answer to call to public service. It was a great process.
Great, thank you all. Item number 2 is discuss the state legislative debrief and interim legislative approach. Paul, do you want to tee this up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're joined by Mr. Drew Campbell and Ms. Brandy Bird from our state legislative consultant team. And so I will, without any further ado, allow them to take the podium and walk us through the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I think Brandy and I've seen some of you since the end of the regular session, some of you since the end of the second special session. And this is the first time we've seen you before the impeachment and the impending special sessions this fall. So to say the least, our every 2-year, 140-day legislature is now, I think, pretty much year round. And what that means for us is that we have to keep our head on a swivel and make sure that nothing untoward comes towards DCTA. Nothing impacts us, and I don't, fear anything, but at the same time, you have to be very aware, and it just takes a lot of time and presence. Brandy, if you want to.
So we just wanted to give you just a quick overview of how this regular legislative session went. And then, as Drew mentioned, we've already got our mind, excuse me, towards the interim efforts and then how we want to position DCTA to prepare for the 2025 legislative session. So, because many of you participated, but we worked with staff on a DCTA legislative day, which we did during the session on March 20th. And so thank you to all of you who were able to attend with us on that. And we met with every member of the DCTA legislative delegation. And I think the board members and staff that participated in that would say that those went very well, that we have really strong relationships with our legislative delegation. They understand all the successes that are happening at DCTA and are very supportive.
Well, the good news is that our delegation delineates us from the other agencies that are having what I would call interesting conversations with their member cities, interesting conversations with some of the legislators. And the important thing that we do, and I know in the feedback that we've gotten even since the end of the session, is that our delegation is very confident in the direction DCTA is going and what we're up to. And they just want to stay in the loop. They want to be apprised, and they're like everyone else, they're seeing what's going on with Cat Metro, DART, et cetera. And they want to make sure that things like that don't befall us in the process.
So just to give you a little bit of an overview of the specific bills that impacted DCTA this session, and you've heard from us several times, so these won't be new topics to you, but there were a couple of bills that could have had a negative impact on DCTA specifically. Drew, do you want to add on those?
Well, I was going to say particularly HB 5140, that was a bill by Representative Briscoe Kane. It didn't go anywhere, but it had to do with DEI. Had to do with DEI and how it affects agencies. And it really puts us, it would put us in a position of being in conflict with federal law. It would cause us to more than likely end up in some sort of litigation. The reason that we bring this up as something that we've got to highlight and watch is heretofore, the legislature pretty much stayed out of that lane. But I think, I think everybody in the room knows that DEI and things like that are now on the forefront of every legislative session. And I think that we're going to have to continue to watch and monitor these issues, because it's not that we want to take a position on the issue. It's to make sure that it doesn't cause us to conflict with federal regulations. And it's an education process that you have to go through with the members of the legislature. And then what was SB 175?
The other bill that could have had an impact was just the bill that would have restricted your ability to have representation in Austin. So the anti-taxpayer funded lobbying legislation. That was Senate Bill 175. That bill passed the Senate, but didn't go anywhere in the House. And so those were really the only two bills that would have specifically impacted DCTA. The other bills that we've mentioned, and we've talked about these when we were before you previously, would have impacted positively the revenue side. So some state funding for public transportation. And there were 4 bills, you can see them here, that were filed this session that would have done that. The one that got the most traction was HJR 77 by Representative Wally. And so that bill did get a hearing in House Transportation, which is further than it's gotten in any previous legislative session. So we would call that progress. And this is the issue that I know Paul has certainly provided some leadership on and wants to have this conversation with all of you later in a strategic planning session about how aggressive DCTA wants to be or how proactive you want to be on this issue.
And I think the important thing about that is this issue to keep in mind is that as Texas continues to grow, and I know we all sitting here in Dallas-Fort Worth, it's the fastest growing metropolitan area in the United States. And we now have 4 contiguous counties with 1 million+ people. Mass transit has got to be part of the solution to our transportation needs. And the state has got to step up and step in and start helping. And I think that the legislature, some in the legislature are beginning to recognize that, and it's becoming a topic. I know that we're beginning to see a lot more conversation about supporting what we're doing in the ports and the cargo that comes from those. And I think, again, as I say, that with the population density that we're beginning to see here, we're going to see members of the legislature start looking for other solutions other than just pouring concrete.
And then there were 2 bills that impacted your peer transit agencies. And so we bring this up because this is a conversation that's continuing during the interim. So the first bill was House Bill 3146. That is a bill that would require DART to separate out our expenditures per member city. So it was a bill that was pushed by the city of Plano. And I know that this is a conversation that's going to continue over the interim through the RTC. Paul has shared with you the letter that was recently sent by a group of mayors. So this is kind of a continuation of this bill. It did not pass the legislative session, but this is the continuation of that conversation, which is going to take place during the interim. And then the other bill that had a negative impact was the Austin Transit Partnership Bill, and that really targeted local government corporations. And you have an LGC through the NTMC, so this was something that we were watching very closely. It wouldn't have impacted NTMC, but it would have impacted very heavily the Austin Transit Partnership and their big Project Connect $8 billion projects that's moving forward in Austin. So we just mentioned this because I think there's a lot to celebrate here for DCTA. You know, there were some real targeted efforts in a negative way towards some of your peer transit agencies, and that was not the case for DCTA. So I think, you know, it just goes to show that the agency is in a very good place with your legislative delegation, and we have a lot to build on.
Yeah, and we don't bring these up to cause alarm. It's just to be aware. We have to be aware because what happens in Austin so very often is that people who are not from the impacted areas, they don't know how to vote. They don't know the agencies. They don't, you know, they look for the delegation to give them some direction. And at this point, I think that everybody here knows that DART is in a strange position at this point. I shouldn't say strange, it's strained situation. And the Austin Transit Partnership is at war with members of the legislature. They don't like the way the funding mechanism works. They feel like that it's, you know, all kinds of things. But the point is that we've got to be aware. We've got to, you know, make sure that we're in the room listening so that we don't inadvertently get dragged into these things. And it's again, I can't begin to say thank you enough to all the hard work you all have done to make sure that the delegation knows who we are knows how strong we are and that our city members work together with the board to make sure that that message is clear, loud, and constant.
Absolutely. And then we're gonna be focused this interim, we came on board in representing DCTA just right before the legislative session. And so this is our first interim with you to have the opportunity to really build that foundation. And so you have a really strong foundation with the legislative delegation in Denton County. Now we want to broaden that. And, we had attempted during the legislative day to go visit the House and Senate Transportation Committee chairs. And at that time in the session, if you don't have a bill that's pending before their committee, it's hard for them to find the time. And that was kind of the feedback that we got from them is, we love you, really like to visit with you, but now would not be the right time to do that. And so we're going to do that over the interim. We'd really like to get them here to see DCTA and tour the operation and really see what this looks like. So that's a big initiative for us this session. And Paul has provided a lot of leadership on this issue as well, and making sure that we're proactive during this interim and getting the right meetings, the right folks out here to really see your system.
Yeah, I don't know how many of you have ever met Senator Nichols. He's chairman of transportation in the Senate. He's an engineer himself, and he has expressed great interest in coming and seeing the operations. He'd love to go out to the maintenance barn. He'd love to do a lot of those things. But he said that Brandy and I, we have one job, and that's to go tell the governor no more specials. And he said, I'll come right to Dallas Fort Worth. But at
No
this
problem.
point, yeah.
I'll handle that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Get
yes.
right on that.
Yes, that's it's on the list. Anyway, they're very interested, and I think that the fun thing is though, and it's like this with Senator Nichols. He is known as the guy who's paved most of Texas, but he recognizes that we have to have other modes of transportation. And I think he would really appreciate seeing the operation here and seeing how efficient that we are. And he has also expressed interest in figuring out how to leverage state dollars to get more federal dollars. But those things are all out there. And yes, come on September 5th, I'll be watching probably like the rest of you on my computer. I will not be in Austin when the impeachment starts. But then it's my understanding from the governor's office that they anticipate within 5 to 10 days after that, they'll call a session to start working on vouchers. And if they're not successful in getting their voucher program in the first special session, then they'll call a second. So I anticipate that we'll be in Austin most of the fall.
And we only mention that because it impacts when we can schedule these meetings and visits with members. If they're tied up in the trial in the Senate and then special sessions in the fall, then next year is really the probably appropriate time when we feel like they'll have time in their schedules to take some of these meetings and visits. So y'all are going to talk about this a little bit later in the board agenda, but Paul is suggesting a conversation with the board in January or sometime Q1 in order to have this conversation so that we then get direction from all of you on where you want us to focus in this next year leading up to the 2025 legislative session.
Obviously, if any opportunities come up, ad hoc, we'll let everybody know. And on a personal note, Byron sends his greetings. He is in Boulder, Colorado.
Good for him.
Yeah, we're jealous.
Well, no, but he's delivering my eldest granddaughter to college. Yeah. So he sends his best and says, yeah, it was 58 degrees last night. And I immediately hung up on him.
We need to have a conversation about what he's being billed.
Yeah, I agree.
So with that, that was all we had for you, but we're happy to take any questions.
Any
or
questions?
comments.
Thank you for all your efforts.
Well, thank you. And again, look, it was obvious on DCTA day. All the members of the legislature, they know you, they trust us, they know Paul, they know the staff here, and that makes all the difference in the world. I've always said, I would love to be a Mercedes-Benz dealership, and that's what we are. We represent Mercedes-Benz. So I just stand there and smile out and go, here you go, and then get out of the way. But thank you again.
So I just want to say, we made it really clear when we were visiting the legislatures that we're not coming for an ask this session. But again, working very, very hard. We need state funding, and I'm glad Senator Nichols is being open to come, because things are not the way they've been. And he needs, and anyone else needs to come, Canales or whoever, to come and see what we're doing, because with all these other states and businesses coming here, we have to have the transportation, and we have to be supported somewhat by the state. I mean,
Yes.
we just have to have that. So,
Being the engineer that he is, that's why I want to get him out there to
Yes.
the maintenance building. Yep. He may be out there a week. You never know. Cause he's fascinated with that stuff.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Randy, thank you. Item 3 is discuss chief financial officer update and consider approval of the monthly financial statements for June 2023 and the quarterly report for Q3 fiscal year 2023. And that's going to be again, Ms. Evans-Jones.
Hello again.
Hello.
I'm a fan of tag team efforts. I think we have a fantastic team, and so as much as possible, as I'm doing these quarterly updates, I want to take that as an opportunity to kind of showcase some of the things in particular that are happening with finance. So I'm pleased to be joined in this presentation by Ms. Brittany Huff, our Senior Manager of Grants. Before we get into the specifics of some of the things that she's been hard at work with grants and some of the things that she's been doing, we'll cover some of the typical things because they a little bit dovetail into some of the things that she'll come forward and talk about. A view that you have seen before. That's the beauty of setting up a set of financial statements, and you kind of get used to looking at things in a regular cadence. So in terms of the revenues are performing behind budget, 34.6 million compared to 39 million. And some of that has greatly to do with the collection of some of the grant revenue. Sales tax continues to perform a little bit ahead of budget, 30.2 million compared to 29.8, where we expect it to be during this particular by the third quarter. So we'll have some updates. There's some really neat updates with respect to grants that I'm pleased that Brittany's here to be able to bring forward. I'm going to push down further into the financial statements. One of the positive things about our particular P&L is that our actuals continue to perform largely behind budget. Some of that is timing. Some of that is timing of expenses, but some of that is the expenses are just going to come in less. You know, if I had a crystal ball and can see, and I little bit can see where we're headed for September 30th. The expenses are definitely going, once they're all accumulated and calculated, they'll probably come in significantly less than budget. Revenue will probably be at or a little bit below, but P&L net income compared to planned net income, I think we'll have a positive bump in that respect. So we continue to see expenditures overall trending behind budget, and that's a good thing at this point. Last thing that I wanted to point out in terms of this particular page, and this is where we kind of get into all of the non-operating, non-standard, non-operating type revenues and expenditures that would happen with respect to the agency. Investment income continues to perform very strong. And I think we know this, but it may be worth mentioning. I had mentioned it in previous or in my most recent one, but this other income expense and this large budgeted amount was for a JROF facility. And so we just haven't had that spending. We're awaiting further direction from DART. And so that's why you see that large variance there. Transfers out represent the funding that DCTA provides to NTMC for that entity's operation, and that similar story there that continues similar to how DCTA is that is performing behind budget as well. We engaged in a conversation with our NTMC board to review the NTMC June financial information last week. So they had an opportunity to see the particulars and work through the particulars related to that transfer out. Are there questions there before we turn it to grant conversation?
Any questions? See any?
Turning it.
Thank you. Good morning, Brittany Huff, Senior Manager of Grants here at DCTA. I have two slides I'm going to walk through. The first slide, this chart matches the first chart that is on your grant report memo. So that's this one. It shows our grant activity for fiscal year 2023, quarter 3, which is April 1 through June 30th. And so during that time, staff drew down $230,000 in grants. So that means we had $230,000 in grant revenue come in. That was for our 5307 grant, which is operating assistance. This is my first quarterly report to you all, so I wasn't going to walk through the memo. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I did change the formatting, and so that's the only note that I really want to make for the report. Previously, we were reporting all non-applied for awards as pending. I've broken them out to be pending in the first chart, which means we have an active application in the system. And then the third chart on the memo is available grant funding. And so that means that it's out there, it's been allocated to DCTA, but we haven't actively submitted an application yet. And it has the status of those on there. So I think that's it for the memo. If you have any questions, I'll answer them now before I move to slide 2.
Any questions?
No? Okay, cool. So this is the exciting slide. So you won't see this with the quarterly report each time, but I wanted to mention it here. And so this slide shows where we were as of 6/30, which was the end of the data reporting period for the memo. And then on July 19th, it was an exciting day because 2 of the pending awards that we had in the system were finalized. And so those are noted here down at the bottom. And then during the month of July, then I worked on drawdowns and we drew down 2.5 million. So not a super exciting third quarter, but getting into an exciting month with July, just with some movement there. So this chart shows where those drawdowns came from. So we expended a van pool, and a large portion of that was for it's called State of Good Repair Grant. So that was the rail grant, and that one's here at the bottom. So that one was awarded, and then it was fully expended because we had expenses throughout the year that were eligible. So we drew that one down. So I was excited and proud of this slide, and I wanted to show it to you this time. You won't see a slide like this next time, but yeah. So.
If I could just say, Brittany, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about it, because when Brittany got here, all these grants were in Region 6 at FTA waiting for someone to tell them what to do with the money. And so we asked Brittany, tell them to send us the money, and that's what she's been doing. So there's more to come, but it's a big day. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. This is not over yet. Of
No,
course not.
no, we have a couple more steps to go in terms of our financial report, if you will indulge me. You have included in your packet the full investment report that is prepared by our investment managers, Hilltop Securities. If you wanted to review through that, it gives you a full listing of all the securities, earnings, et cetera. What I've presented and kind of condensed down into a slide is just letting you know through June 30th, our book value at 103.3 compared to well, that's still 103, 103.275 compared to 103.256. So a slight unrealized loss. Those investments, as you continue to hold them to maturity, they continue to come up to their maturity point. So you only realize that if you liquidate the portfolio, we have no intention of doing. I have another couple of slides that another couple of graphs that I include in there to just have you provide an understanding of the credit quality of those sorts of investments that we hold, and our average yield to maturity as well, and the days of maturity. And so that's like an average. If you take a look into the full investment doc, you'll see that there's a number of those that are, much longer maturity dates. There are quite a few that were as of as of June 30th, they were up for maturity or close to that maturity date based on when they were invested, based on when the assets were invested. But overall, a healthy portfolio, as we saw on slide 2 or 3 of this presentation, that investment income continues to perform well. The last thing I wanted to cover in this report is just kind of a ERP thought process, and sharing some of that with this group and this body. So it's the ERP time. And the approach that we will undertake to do that is, first of all, recognizing that the previous administration, the previous team did a lot of work with respect to ERP. In terms of the work that they've done already, or the previous team did already, was taking the universe of possible software solutions and boiling that down to 2 or 3 or 4 options that appeared to be good solutions for the organization. And then things happened, and here I am. So what we will do is start with that, with a good bit of those options that have already been boiled down for us. And the intent is to assemble an internal kind of stakeholder team from, representing different departments within the organization. Obviously, the finance team will be heavy users of the system. And so we want to look through all of the different, how's your general ledger function? What does it look like? What does procurement look like? But we also recognize that we're not the only users of the system. There are members of our team that will put in data, process invoices, et cetera. So we want to allow some visibility to all our team members there. With respect to that internal stakeholders team, finance, IT team, I feel like we're about to be conjoined at the hip for a while in terms of getting this project off the ground and moving forward. During this period, September, October, we intend to conduct demos of a short list of options that we believe to be good fits for us. And like demo means not like, hi, nice to meet you for an hour. You open up this platform and show me this, and I decide on a multiple $1 million long-term solution based on that. Demo means a couple of days, and let's spend a chunk of time talking through and looking at how this thing works and that thing works, and how do you handle AP payment processing? What does your reports look like? All of these different things. Demo means, what other solutions do you offer? Because as this team that you have been seeing before you has been assembled, one of the aspects, as we get more and more into DCTA life, we see a need for systems that connect. HR system that connects into this financial, potentially a, asset management or facility management system that connects in. So this demo, we would like it to be as all-inclusive as it can be, so that we begin to take a look at complementary software, not just the financial stuff, but complementary pieces of software that are all made by the same owner that plug into one another as best, and understanding what those offerings are. So from there, we'll pick the winner. We'll select the provider, and that starts a rather robust, extensive contracting process. Meanwhile, kind of looking forward into the November to January column, life goes on. We're closing the books. We are preparing the 2023 records for audit. That break time in between picking the software provider and going forward with getting started, we're using that as an opportunity to get life done, close out our books, et cetera, for the 2023 stage. You also see me mentioning an owner rep selection. So the owner rep, we have mentioned that in this setting before, and it was something that was contemplated in the budget that was allocated for this project. That is that entity, that company that has a unique skill set in the software that we select, that has a skill set in helping our team to march that forward. Software company, I've been through this a little bit before. The software company wants to get the thing done. They want to get it done as quickly as possible. And that may not necessarily be 100% in your best interest, the methods and ways. So it's helpful to have an owner rep. So once we select the software, we will work to put an owner rep in place that acts as our advocate that has a unique skill set in that particular software. Contracts will come back to you for approval and presentation. And then another thing that we'll begin working on, and it'll start happening here with the approval of this 2024 budget, the hiring of those members that Jane Flarwitz, our senior manager of grant, touched on when she showed in the previous presentation, the new team members. Those team members are going to help to one, provide redundancy and kind of help to make sure that we have cross-training happening, but those new team members are also going to help make sure that as we get this process going with plugging in the new software, that we have people to help with some of the, existing things that we have to do. We have to, during this process of standing up this new ERP system, you have to look to the future and you have to live in the present at the same time. And that can sometimes be difficult if you are very thin with the number of people on your team. So what you should expect to see is us beginning to get those positions posted so that we can find the best, the brightest, et cetera, and have those people come onto our team and start to learn that process so that they can be fully functional, helpful, and ready to go when it's time to get going. So we go through the contracting phase. Now we're moving forward into February through May. We anticipate starting, during that time frame. And I put a couple asterisks on there because that's what I want, but it's also contingent upon the people on the other side of the curtain in terms of the software provider, the owner rep selection, and there'll be some scheduling that has to happen as a part of the contracting part. So I'm standing here before you in August telling you how I envision it going as we begin to move forward and working with those that are selected. We'll get more refinement on the timing. We intend on bringing back the audit in a similar timeframe. So that's concluding on the audit and getting board of directors approval in that February timeframe, which is consistent with how and when we presented it before. From the start of the conversion, it's typically about a 12-month process, 12 to 18 months process from the start of it. And so we anticipate being completed with that project about 12 months once we get it kicked off. I put this last picture here because this is where you kick in. Once we start, thoughts and prayers. We need thoughts and prayers as we move forward. Well wishes, all of that. We have an outstanding and amazing team, and I believe that we will accomplish great things with it. But yeah, I saw that. I was like, yeah, we want thoughts and prayers too. So with that.
Sherelle, if I could just add one thing.
Yes.
She mentioned the need to upgrade systems, integrate systems. The other part of this is, yes, it's about optimizing for the future, but the platform that we are on is increasingly unstable, and our staff is spending more and more time on the phone with tech support that is less and less available to them. And so there is somewhat of an imperative here that this timeline needs to proceed down this path because of those things. I mean, that's a fair statement, correct? So there's not, we are running out of optionality on when we kick this thing off. And so this feels like the right approach to balance the space that we have, but then the need to get things done in a timely manner. And I think we might have asked you, what, 3 times in your interview process, have you done an ERP before? And you said yes all 3 times. So it feels like we're in good shape.
I'm a little bit like thrown off, like how often does this come up in one's professional career?
I think I remember saying yes in 6 months.
But no, it wasn't 6 months. But no, I'm excited for the approach that Sherelle and Javier, who's going to have a big part in this as well, the approach that they're putting together and all these pieces falling into place. So thank you, ma'am, for your help there.
That's good. Good thoughts. I think that's good for the public to hear that we have a sense of urgency to get this done. As our CEO said, it needs to happen sooner than later
Right.
because of these things. So
Right.
that's good for everyone to hear that. Questions? We're all excited. So you have an action item today. This is, we need to approve the monthly financial statements for 2023 and the quarterly report for Q3 fiscal year 2023. Any, we have a motion? Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Let's give it to Director McGuire. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 4.
Lots of form.
Apparently, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Apparently, we will take a 5-minute recess. Yeah, at this point, no kidding. It is 10:58. We'll return here in 11:02. It is.
I didn't think
You-
this was a quorum.
It- It,
Thank you, the guard, so.
thank you, members. It is 11:08, and I'm trying to get control of the meeting again. We're back in session. Item number 4, discuss update of A-Train enhancement study. Paul Christine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Today, we're going to bring you an update on our A-Train enhancement study. This is a discussion item only. No action is required. Just to give you a reset on big picture, what we've been up to, in the spring of 2022, we began to articulate a vision for enhancing the value of the A-Train, which was about eventually extending the train to downtown Carrollton, causing the train to move faster to better synchronize with the regional schedule, and also evaluating the potential for a station at Corinth. And this was the approach that I laid out at that time. Let's talk about our objectives. Let's talk about scenarios. Let's look at enabling capital projects. Let's understand how those projects are valued across all the partners that are going to be at the table. And then let's talk about funding and begin executing the program. We are somewhere between 3 and 4 right now. And so when we gave that briefing in the spring of 22, we did a first run and of these two ideas, frequency and connectivity, and then the extension to downtown Carrollton. We provided you a briefing in the spring of this year that talked about what are the projects that it takes to make these things happen. The feedback from the board at that time was, okay, now let's iterate those alternatives with the potential for a station at Corinth. How does a new stop in Corinth change the capital requirements for increasing frequency and connectivity and getting to downtown Carrollton? That's how we've gotten to where we are today. So this work now is done where we have done this iteration. This table was provided in the last briefing, and this shows the scenarios that we evaluated in February of 2023. We looked at what if we just made the train go faster on a 20-minute headway, but we didn't get to downtown Carrollton, and the board eliminated that alternative at that time. And then the 3 alternatives that you asked us to review further was a 30-minute headway alternative, a 20-minute headway alternative, and a 15-minute headway alternative. And the capital costs that you see there were the costs associated with the infrastructure for all of those projects. My mouth is flashing red. You get a new one. Oh, now it's green. All right, sorry. I don't want to get. So this is where we were at that time. So what happens to these scenarios that we developed when we add a Corinth station? Last time we talked, I introduced you to a string line chart. This is the standard way that you plan for a railroad. This is train A leaves Denton at this time, train B leaves Carrollton at this time. Where do these trains meet across the whole system? What this analysis has shown us is that on a 30-minute headway alternative, there is no double tracking required at the Corinth station. And we have that in our operation today at the Old Town station, for instance. When you go to a 20-minute headway solution, you do have to have a place for trains to meet and pass in Corinth, kind of like what we see at the Hebron station today. And then finally, when you get to option 3, interestingly, the meet pass requirement goes away at the station at Corinth. And that's an important thing to think about if we're talking, if the board wanted to take an approach where we go from 30 minutes to 20 minutes to 15 minutes, this would tell you that you would end up building infrastructure that you may not need into the future. And so that's the reason to look at it. Through the course of this study, and in the context of the regional conversation that I've been having with Trinity Metro and with DART about the Silver Line, we started to think about, and I wanted to articulate to you, what do each of these scenarios get you? Because what you see is that the costs get very high, or they get higher when you get to the 15-minute headway time of operation. So wanted to talk about what these scenarios get you from a schedule perspective, from a runtime perspective, and from an operating cost perspective. On a 30-minute schedule, the A train would be aligned with the peak period of the Silver Line. The Silver Line, though it's not in operation today, anticipates a 30-minute headway during peak periods and then 1 hour off-peak headways. And so you would align well with that regional schedule, but the green line, which was also part of that regional connectivity thing, that light rail system varies widely throughout the day, for anywhere from a 15-minute off-peak period to sometimes as much as a 7 or an 8-minute peak period. We will not get to 7 or 8 minutes on our railroad. But what it tells you is some customer is going to have to wait, depending on how we do this and how we get to downtown Carrollton. From a runtime perspective, in this first cut, we have not improved the runtime from Denton to Trinity Mills if you're going to Carrollton as a final destination. Now, the question you would ask is, well, how many people that are going to ride this train are going to use Carrollton as the destination, or are they going to just jump on the Silver Line, at which point they would love it to step off of the A train, step onto the Silver Line train, and then continue on their way? We don't know the answer to that. We haven't done the ridership forecasting to think about who's going to stop in Carrollton, but we're doing this in the context of regional connectivity. So it seems like we would defer to wanting to connect to the Silver Line first and foremost. But from an operating cost perspective, same runtime, same train count means that from DDTC to Trinity Mills, you're not going to spend any more money today than you will under the 30-minute scenario for the territory you're currently covering, but you will spend more money for operating costs to run that last 2 miles to get to downtown Carrollton. That analysis makes sense? Okay, so we'll go to the 20-minute scenario. On the 20-minute scenario, you're going to get to Carrollton faster, but you're not going to connect to the green line the Silver Line or the green line, either one of those, because Silver Line's 30 minutes or an hour and the green line varies widely. So you might get to Carrollton faster, but unless you're stopping in Carrollton, you may not be happy with your trip. From a runtime perspective, you do get there a little bit faster. And because you're getting there faster, we're running more trains throughout the day, which increases operating costs. Then the last item down there, the 15-minute schedule, could align with the green line. And then every other A train will meet a Silver Line train. And so that feels like a pretty good solution, that if you're in an off-peak period for green line, you'd have a good connection, and then you're going to wait maximum 15 minutes for the Silver Line train to show up, and then you'll be on your way to Plano or DFW. And then same thing for runtime and operating costs. So these are the things that we should be thinking about when planning the railroad for how we think about what do these runtimes get us. We looked at the station alternatives in Corinth. What does a single-sided platform versus a two-sided platform or a centerline platform look like? All of them work. Technically, this builds off the analysis that was done in 2019 for a Corinth station feasibility study. If there's no double track required, it's a single-sided platform. And there's differences of cost that you'll see between single-sided and double-sided. The call out here, 0.2 of a mile from the station as the crow flies into the NCPC campus, makes it a walkable trip, most likely. And of course, as Corinne thinks about the mixed use development that they're thinking about on the onside of our track, that would be even closer. So now we're going to walk you through what are the enabling projects required to deliver either a 30, a 20, or a 15-minute scenario. And I put this slide in the packet just as kind of a key. We're going to refer to, and not a ton, but we're going to refer to a downtown transit center siding extension. What you see is, here's the existing siding, and the red line shows how much longer that siding needs to be. Again, that's to incorporate the meets and passes that you see on the string line. There's a Med Park extension, actually in 2 different versions. If you don't have if you're not going to Carrollton, or I'm sorry, if you're not adding a Corinth station, the Med Park extension is shorter than it is when you add the Corinth station, because the stop time shifts the place on the string line where the meet happens. So that track has to be longer. There's a siding south of Corinth. So here's that Corinth station, looking at a single side platform here. There's a pretty long siding south of the Corinth station that comes into play. There's the potential for an extension of the Highland Village Louisville Lake siding. And then you see obviously the track upgrade between Trinity Mills and downtown Carrollton, with or without what we call the Broadway siding that cuts through all of these grade crossings that we see in downtown Carrollton. So here's the next iteration of the table. What we're looking at is, how does runtime perform in every one of these scenarios? How do the capital costs change? What is the operating reliability? Meaning, if there is an interruption on the track because of a signal issue or a passenger issue or just some other mechanical issue, what is the ability of the railroad to recover the schedule? The fewer trains that you're running, the easier it is for one train to just hold off a little bit longer so they can get back in. But if you're running a bunch of trains, it's gonna make it really hard to recover your schedule. So it's very unscientific. It goes from very good to poor. I don't know that poor under the 15-minute scenario means really, really bad. It just means on the opposite end of the spectrum of what we have today from a service perspective. And I would also say at the outset, all of these numbers are very high level, very programmatic, and these concepts are very high level, very programmatic, because we're trying to get kind of honed in on what is the direction that we want to proceed, hence the reason for this conversation today. From a runtime perspective, the existing service from downtown Denton Transit Center to Trinity Mills is about 44 minutes. Since that's the apple that we have to compare to, in order to compare apples to apples, we see that if you have a 30-minute option, but you don't put a Corinth station in, the runtime improves a little bit. Southbound 40 minutes, it stays the same. Northbound 44 minutes. When you add the Corinth station, it gets a little worse. It loses about a minute in the schedule. This number 45 is red. That's the only number on this whole chart where the proposed runtime doesn't work as well as the current runtime. Conversation that I had with the consultants this morning was the purpose of this exercise was just to define what is technically feasible. If the board wanted to go further down the road on a 30-minute headway, there are opportunities to cause the 30-minute headway train to run faster. So a train will land every 30 minutes at the downtown Carrollton station, but it would get there in something less than 44 minutes. That just means more trains are on the system as you stack those lines on the string chart further and further to the right. On the 20-minute headway, you see that we've implemented improvements to curvature and positive train control that cause runtime to improve into the mid 30 minutes. And then in the 15 minutes, you see those same curvature and PTC improvements that have improved runtime between, again, DDC and Trinity Mills. Any questions about that? Okay. The next two lines are what is the total travel time between DDTC and downtown Carrollton? What you see is under a 30-minute scenario, you can easily get all the way to Carrollton in basically the same travel time as you have today. Or I'm sorry, in the 20 and 15-minute headways, you can get all the way to Carrollton on the same travel time that you have today. It's obviously slower in the 30-minute headway scenario. This turn time line, this is how much time does the train crew have when they get to the end of the line to unbuckle their seatbelt, get out of their seat, use the restroom, make a phone call, then get back on the other end of the train and start running it in the other direction. They get 16 minutes on either end of the train today. What you see is you get less time if you're going a further distance, which makes sense. You get less time on a 20-minute headway, and on the 15-minute headway, you have a 7-minute turn time when you're in Carrollton, which kind of lends towards how that schedule recovery isn't as great when you're running that fast all the way to downtown Carrollton. Again, high level, but this is the way that it shook out first. The numbers are self-explanatory. I'll just talk about a couple of different pieces. 53.6 was the number to get to Carrollton without a Corinth station. The cost of a single side platform programmatically about 6.9 million. That's why you see you don't need double sided on the 15-minute headway, so you're at 6.9 million. The center platform station is about 3 times the cost. And that's the way that I would think about these numbers. Here's one cost, here's 3 times the cost. That's the station plus the additional track that's in the station area. And then what's here is just every one of those track upgrades that I pointed to previously. It's just is it in the project or is it not in the project? Just a yes, no kind of solution. So we'll talk more about this right now.
Paul,
Yes, sir.
do you mind going back? I just want to drill into that 15-minute column. So we're looking at a number of 172 million in capital cost without the Corinth station for that timing.
Correct.
We're looking at another 90 million. I can't do math today. Yeah, another what, 90 million?
About 90, yeah.
By adding the Corinth station in there.
Mhm.
Can you kind of walk me through what that delta is, or why the Corinth station is that much more
Yes, sir.
of an impact.
We will get there.
Okay.
So under the 30 minutes,
We have another.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just real quick about the station options. If at some point, beyond the scope of like the long range financial plan, we do take double tracking all the way from the DDTC to downtown Carrollton. What are the odds that a single side platform becomes a throwaway project? Is that something that we should consider?
Yeah, it's a great question. Off the top of my head, I would say that if you look at what a two-sided platform is, it is basically it's two one-sided platforms. So maybe it's feasible. We'd have to dig into the engineering, but you build phase one, and then if you need a double track there in the future, you build the other platform, the matching platform on the other side. Unless for some reason we were bent on the idea of a center platform concept, in which case we would there could be potentially be throwaway work from a feasibility standpoint. I don't think there's much difference in the way those two would perform, but you could grow into a two-sided platform configuration like this. But if one day we wanted a center platform, then that would cause potentially a little bit of a throwaway.
I guess follow-up question, how big of a difference would this make to the future theoretical board that might be choosing between these options if there's a double track added?
I would have to have a look at, I've got individual cost estimates for every one of those, and so we can certainly frame that.
And
up.
that's later is fine.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Okay. So here's on the 30-minute headway pattern with the Corinth station and the downtown Carrollton extension. And I'm going to go into the 30-minute and the 15-minute because from a recommendation standpoint, I don't believe that there's much to be gained by considering the 20-minute scenario. Like if you go to what we said at the front, it doesn't line up with anything. Unless you're going to Carrollton, you don't really care about getting down there faster. And so what we're going to do is talk about 30 minutes and 15 minutes. So here's the full string line for the 30-minute scenario. What I said at the outset about improving run times, here's my thought. When we cut the ribbon on this thing and somebody gets on the train and goes to Carrollton for the first time, they're going to say, I thought we'd go faster. And we don't want that. There is something about the rider experience on a train that's moving at velocity that makes the product attractive and it more practical against competing modes. And so as we go in another step down this road, there's an opportunity, I think, to tighten up what happens here at the ends of the line, steepen the curves of these tracks and say, here's kind of a middle ground maybe between 30 minutes on same runtime and 30 minutes on an improved runtime. And if the board wants to look at the 15-minute alternative, we can also look at that. So that's the schedule. And the good news is what the analysis tells us is you can add a Corinth station and get to Trinity Mills in downtown Carrollton just by improving the track that's there, taking it from what is today accepted track at walking speed, basically, to something that could handle 60 miles an hour. And then this was the estimate that we provided back in February. You add the Corinth station platform on there. Again, programmatic numbers, no real engineering behind this other than desktop views on aerials and all that sort of stuff. But order of magnitude, this directionally tells you where that scenario is. Any questions about that? Okay. So now here's the 15-minute headway pattern. And the answer to your question, Mayor Gilmore, about why so expensive. When you add this, when you have the 15-minute scenario, you see that you've added two trains coming together over a longer distance at the downtown Denton Transit Center. So you extend that siding. You see that you've had to add what is a 12,500 foot siding. So 2.5 miles of grading, drainage, track bed, signal system, all that stuff to accommodate this meet pass. You have to extend 8,900 feet on the Highland Village Louisville Lake siding to accommodate that meet pass. You have to build a new siding at the Hebron station. Or, I'm sorry, that's existing. You have to build this new Broadway siding here. So you're taking on basically all of the projects, all the enabling projects except for Med Park in this scenario. So that's the reason why. And here it is in pictures. There you see the DDTC extension. If you told us that you wanted to walk through from 30 to 20 to 15, we would tell you there would be throwaway work at Med Park. So that's off the table, so we don't have to think about that. But here's that South Corinth siding. Here's the Highland Village Louisville Lake extension, and here's the Broadway siding with the extension between Trinity Mills and downtown Carrollton. I'll tell you, I'm wrestling with the name of this siding because I know how important it is for our member cities to have the resources watched over, and the conversation about a Corinth station causes antennas to go up and say, wait, are we spending money in places outside of our cities? The Corinth siding is not necessarily, it's required because of this platform. If you don't have that platform there, you don't have to build the siding. That's the big takeaway there. So, I'm sorry, you had a question? Okay, so here's just a look at if you migrated from a 30-minute headway scenario to a 15-minute headway scenario. What you see here is enabling projects 60.5 to 15-minute headways 259.7 with the Corinth single-sided platform there. So I'm gonna transition into another adjacent conversation, but I want to pause and make sure I'm still judged. Potentially. It changes the conversation. So as we think about direction here today, we're always working towards this program. Here's the projects, and I just put the 30-minute scenario up here. Here's the projects by project. Here's the contributors. This project is by the COG because that is the taking it from accepted track to class 2. The difference in the funding so that COG ensured there would be no throwaway work if DART did their project and then we do our project. But all the rest of these columns, DCTA, DART, City of Corinth, COG, and then FRA through or USDOT through discretionary grants. That's the work that we have ahead of us to figure out where all these funding pieces come from. I want to pause here for a second and talk about this line down here. DART, FRA, Plano dialogue and decision-making on the Silver Line heavy maintenance location is going to have an impact on funding participation and the railroad operation. And I've actually got some talking points here because I want to make sure I get it right. So I'm going to grab these real quick. There has been somewhat of an evolution since the boards at DCTA and DART signed the interlocal agreement back in November of 2021 that says, hey, we're going to work together on this regional rail maintenance facility. So I've been in conversation with Dee Leggett and her team at WSP and on staff. And what is happening today is that DART is really proceeding down 2 different paths for a heavy maintenance capability for the Silver Line. The JROF had been the primary alternative, which triggered the introduction of the ILA, until the FRA came to them and said, we need to rethink the waiver that the FRA had granted for not installing PTC between the JROF and downtown Carrollton. The FRA had said, we got a clear path for you all to not have to install PTC and just use what's called temporal separation, or making sure that trains, the Silver Line train and the freight train that operates out there are not on the track at the same time. Well, when the East Palestine, Ohio derailment happens, that causes policymakers to pause. FRA came back and said, let's look at this again. Right now, I am in the process of helping DART revise our positive train control implementation plan so we can resubmit that waiver to FRA. We don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. And so at the same time, DART has been working with the city of Plano to get permission to build what was a light maintenance facility out at their station at Shiloh Road, which is on the far east end of the line. As their conversation with Plano has progressed, the requirements for that building have gotten to a point where there really is not much of a difference between the light maintenance facility and the full-on heavy maintenance facility, but for $10 to $20 million, at which point DART says, okay, well, for the same cost of building a light maintenance facility there and a heavy maintenance facility at DCTA, I might just be able to have one consolidated heavy maintenance facility at the far end of the Shiloh Road station in Plano. That provides them several advantages, including they don't have to shuttle their equipment from Carrollton to J-Roff every day. They're going to end their service out at Plano and they just pull right off into the shop and get repaired. It's more cost effective in the long run. And so the city of Plano and DART are still working through those details, and DART is working towards a final decision by planning and zoning, city council, all those sorts of things. So right now DART doesn't know which direction they're going to go, but they have two clear alternatives. And the alternative that they pick could potentially impact what we end up doing. That all make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So if we are going to operate a region, and these slides were not in your packet because I built them yesterday as I'm thinking about how to tee up this conversation. As we think about operating a regional railroad with connectivity to the Silver Line, we need to understand a few things about what we have in the A-train corridor. This is the same track chart, downtown Denton, all the way to Carrollton, Trinity Mills, and then downtown Carrollton. Today, the A-train runs from Trinity Mills Station all the way to downtown Denton. That's the yellow line. If we extend to downtown Carrollton, it'll keep going that way. Today, the DG&O, a short line freight railroad, operates from their yard right near downtown Carrollton. And they operate between downtown Carrollton and the Trinity Mills Station. And then they are serving a few freight customers on the A-train corridor all the way up to, their limits are the Highland Village Louisville Lake Station. Their actual last customer is somewhere around here at the lumber yard. And then you see the Silver Line. If the Silver Line goes to the J-Rock, now you have a third railroad operating with the Blue Line from downtown Carrollton all the way into the Joint Rail Operations Facility. I'm sorry, John. So 3 railroads, different limits on the A-train corridor.
And they all have to be positive. They have to be time-spaced.
They have today, they have to be time-spaced because we are the only PTC railroad. And we're not on there when DG&O is on there, and then we wouldn't be on there when the Silver Line is on there. And Silver Line and DG&O wouldn't be on there at the same time. And that's a very important point for what I'm going to talk about now. So here's a snapshot of what the schedules of these railroads might look like. The A-train, this is what the schedule does look like. Weekday start, 5 a.m. from DDTC, ends at 10 o'clock. 8 a.m. on the weekends to 10 o'clock on the weekend. The Silver Line is going to run from 06 to 9, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. or up to 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. If the A-train hours don't match the Silver Line hours, then we lose the benefit of the utility for people who want to take the A-train to go to the airport, the public comments that you heard today about the train doesn't run when I need it to, and you lose the effectiveness of this extension. The reason that matters from a railroad operating perspective is because I want to walk you through these graphs here. These are operating plan graphs that talk about who occupies this railroad at what times of the day and what days of the week. So Silver Line is blue, DG&O is orange, A-train's yellow. Green is a maintenance of way window. You have to fix the railroad. It has to be repaired, maintained, all that sort of thing. And then this temporal separation transition time is the time that it takes a dispatcher to the train crew from DGNO to call and say, I'm off the railroad, then throw the switches, that the switches change, the electric locks and derails come into place, and now we're moving in a different mode. This is our current schedule, or this is our current operating plan. You see, DGNO has the railroad from Sunday at 5 in the evening all the way to 4 AM on Monday morning, and then A train comes online. Think back to your Thomas the Train days, right? The A train comes online, and then we switch over to A train operations. We've got some available time in white on the railroad today. We've got plenty of space for maintenance of away windows. And Silver Line isn't on this because this is what we're happening today. When the Silver Line gets added, what you see is all the white space goes away, the railroad's completely occupied, and DGNO is largely unaffected. If we want to match the regional schedule, the yellow box gets a lot bigger. And DGNO's time gets a lot smaller. So what you see here is, look at 12:30 to 4 AM. That's not a lot of time to move a train out of downtown Carrollton, chug it up the line at a few miles an hour, go to a lumberyard, switch over, all that sort of stuff. It really constrains DGNO's operation. And it also doesn't give the Silver Line a whole lot of time to move. This is what it looks like if the trains are not able to be interoperable with one another from a PTC perspective on the railroad. And I would venture to say that's going to be a hard sell for the other railroads that occupy the corridor.
But isn't that what the extended hours is going to do? I guess it's gonna do that before the Silver Line gets in operation, or there's more play.
Well, in order for us to get to extended hours, we have to think about how do we build a railroad that would get there. So what this means, even under a 30-minute scenario, even under a 30-minute headway scenario where we said you don't need it to go to downtown Carrollton, you don't need a siding here to go to downtown Carrollton. If we want to extend our hours, we likely will have to build that Broadway siding to get in there. So there's an infrastructure piece to that. And then this tells us that there's a PTC component to this because temporal separation is not really an alternative anymore. So that opens the door to the conversation around the interoperability of our PTC system with the DART PTC system. DGNO does not have PTC today. They would be required to be PTC equipped. And so railroads can do this all the time if they're so equipped, but this railroad has not been equipped that way. And so this, to Judge Eads' point about what does this do to the cost, it changes the cost numbers that we talked about before. I don't know how yet, but from a regional operations perspective, we have to think about these things. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So next steps to consider. What I would like to do is have some direction from the board today on what do you want us to continue to explore? Because there are some pieces of this infrastructure and plan that regardless of what alternative we end up with, we're going to have to figure out, like the segment between Trinity Mills and downtown Carrollton. Now you could say, well, if DART was going to do it first, they would be taking on that engineering work and all that sort of stuff. But remember what I told you, I don't know what DART is going to do. And do we want to wait on that decision, or do we want to control our own destiny? And there's always something to be worked out later on down the road once those funds are spent. We need to maintain our engagement with DART, the FRA, and Plano. Again, we are the submitters of this PTC implementation plan change. And so we're doing that. We need to begin our conversations or continue our conversations with Carrollton on their quiet zones. A big driver of that number between Trinity Mills and downtown Carrollton are the cost of building quiet zones. Another reason to think about the Broadway siding is if you're going to improve those quiet zones to single track, you might as well do it to double track if we know we want to be a regional railroad that has interoperability and needs that siding for all these railroads to be interacting. We can begin at this point to begin talking with the city of Corinth about their interest in this program, understanding directionally what their stations may cost, and discuss who would begin to progress preliminary engineering. I would like to see us take on some preliminary engineering and cost estimate refinements for this, again, the track segments that we know we're gonna need no matter what. We can begin talking about what's the NEPA process, the National Environmental Protection Act process gonna look like for this whole program. If we're gonna go to Carrollton, we need to start talking with DART about lease renewal and expansion of the limits of the lease. We did the appraisal on the corridor last year with a joint appraiser. The long-term lease was gonna be a presumed thing with DART going to the Joint Rail Operating Facility. If they end up needing to go to Plano, then it's not a presumed thing. There's a deal to be made there. We will begin before the PTC implementation plan revision is submitted. We'll be sending a letter to DGNO saying we're revising this plan, and that's going to start these operations conversations like we just talked about. We're going to remain engaged with DART on their planning, engineering, and construction. Their current revenue service estimate on the website says late 25, mid 26. And then we can begin to evaluate federal funding and RTC funding streams. So that is a lot to digest, I recognize, but hopefully you have an understanding of from a physical infrastructure perspective, how we need to be thinking, and then from a regional interoperability standpoint, how we need to be thinking, and how all that plus what DART is going to do plays into how this program comes together. The good news is if you don't want to, we don't have to wait to take more steps. But we will need to step through it in such a way that we don't get ahead of the development that has to happen naturally out in the space. So,
okay.
With that, I'll take questions.
All right. So I think I want to ask the board, is there any need for us to continue thinking about the 20-minute headway option? Does anybody feel we still keep that? No? Okay. So let's formally just drop the 20-minute option. So, okay, so now we can just start talking about the 15 and 30-minute option. And people's thoughts on that.
I'll jump in. I think the objective of this board is to always look for the long-term future and increase the ridership. We all realize that the ridership is not where we want it to be, and I believe that having the 15-minute headway will increase ridership, and I think balance that with the potential of the Corinth station. I think that would expand the amount of users, not only just with their campus, but the redevelopment and people who are adjacent to that, instead of getting in the car and having to go all the way down to the Howardville station or up to Denton. And so I think that we try to work towards the 15-minute. And I think we referencing Mayor Costa's comments earlier about maybe some state participation if we have a clearly identified project here that we're aiming towards. I think that might help matters, and with other partners potentially. But that would be I agree with the no 20-minute. I think we take that off the table. There obviously are some financial constraints here that we're going to have to balance out, but I think we need to be looking and working towards that 15-minute goal to achieve. That would be my 2 cents worth. $260 million.
Notice.
I guess you want to add?
I completely agree. I think that no matter how you slice it, these are all big investments, and why make a big investment if it's not going to change the landscape, make the A train a more attractive option than driving. And that's, we have to go with the 15-minute headways. I also completely agree that, I've said it before, but I'll say it again, that the Corinth station is going to add a lot of value for our current riders and also for potential future riders. Everybody benefits when we have more folks near the train who can easily get to it and use it. I agree that I would love for us to, pursue as much state partnership as we can. These are, we're not talking about small numbers, but yeah, I think that this is the 15-minute option in particular represents such a big value add for our constituents that I think that there's a very strong argument to be made for state partnership.
Go big or go home.
Well, I think we're getting to consensus. But I agree. I mean, transportation, whatever we do in transportation, we have to look at long-term. I mean, when we look at, again, I'm going to go to RTC's 2045 plan. We have to look far ahead. If we're wanting it to be a seamless process for our constituents, then we've got to make it that way with with DART and who we work with, right? And because a lot of them will be going into Dallas and getting onto the Silver Line. So I think the relationships that we have right now with the other transit agencies helps in making these decisions, because I do believe that, Paul, thank you for how you've worked with the representatives from the other transit agencies. I think y'all are of one mind. We want to make this a good experience, safe experience for our riders. And as to Mayor Gilmore, absolutely. You know, it's, I don't want to look back 10, 20 years from now and go, gosh, we didn't do the brave thing and the right thing. And that's with transportation. I think for the funding, what I'm excited about is if there's going to be funding from the state, and if we can get more funding, federal funding, they're more apt to do it on a train, right? They're more apt to go, oh, because y'all are gonna, the trains are there. They're going to meet with other transit agencies. It's a system, right? That it's not new to our to Texas or the country. And so I think when we've talked to legislatures, I feel like if we're going to get money, this is where we're going to get it. So, yeah, 15-minute for me.
Okay. I think 15 minutes would be basically that should be our goal. So I think we now have direction to move towards 15 minutes. Then I think the next steps, you still have to have an interim plan, probably to move to a 30-minute at some point. You'd have to create that plan.
Yes, sir. I mean, the good news is that the 30-minute plan is the improvement of that track from Trinity Mills to Carrollton, and you have to have that for the 15-minute scenario as well. So we can prioritize implementation in such a way that happens depending on the funding that comes in and when the funding comes in and all that sort of stuff. But so this is clear direction, and so we'll take this back and put together a program approach around this and report back as soon as possible.
Communication with the city of Corinth, would that be also one of the next steps the staff has to do?
Yes, sir, it would, and I would open the opportunity for any board member who has relationships that says, hey, I'd love to be a part of those conversations. That's the way that we can approach that.
I've been having conversations with the mayor and city manager. I'd be happy to help you develop.
Okay.
As well, I've been working on that for years with them.
Okay. What other steps or direction do you need from the board at this time?
That's great direction for us to stay busy for quite a while on this program. So thank you very much. The other big part of this is going to be opening the conversation with DGNO and their interests in making sure that their freight service is protected. They have a federal common carrier obligation to serve customers. And so when they say this isn't going to work for us, that matters. So we have to listen to that. And I don't know where they're at in where their mind is going to be when we get into this process. So we will be checking in with them very shortly.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Let's see, do we have lunch already? Okay. Lunch is available. So let's take a recess for about 20 minutes. And it is 11:54. We'll be on recess. All right. It is 12:30 and we'll go ahead and restart our DCTA Board of Directors meeting. Item number 5 is discuss update on marketing and communications plan. David Magana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David Magana, Director of Marketing and Communications for DCTA. Happy to present today. I last presented to you guys back in February, where I gave you a sketch of some of the places that we wanted to go and some of the things we wanted to do. And it was really just kind of an initial set of placement of ideas. And I'm happy to tell you, we've been carrying through on a lot of that stuff, which you'll see in this presentation today. So we'll talk about all of that and the concept of approaching it through strategic thinking, planning and execution, and then how that applies to brand, social media, community relations, and of course, recruitment. So happy to present to you today. And of course, everything that we do has in mind these 3 thoughts: our mission statement, our vision statement, and our values. Get people where they need and want to go, making it easy for the writer, and drive a better future for Denton County. So we're all of those things we're keeping in mind as we communicate in the way that we do. So all this began really when I first started in late November with a thought towards we have to get to a place, a vision that we have to create, and how we get there really starts with brand review. And so as we've been going through, as I've been going through the archives and the files and all the recent stuff, I've noticed, and this is not a criticism, this is just an observation, that we have shown a lot of brand inconsistency over the past 8 to 10 years as an organization. For example, our last 3 budget books. And these are some recent documents from recent years, 2019, 21, 22. All have very different looks and feels, and we're insulting the logo over there at one point. So, and then looking through other things, I see a lot of different looks and feels in the way that we present ourselves. So I have a question. After looking through all this stuff, my question is, where's home? How do we talk about ourselves, and where do we start, and how do we look and feel when we do that? And I got a lot of different answers, but not one answer. So my next observation was, you know what? The DCTA brand does have some very strong elements, really good ones. We also have way too many elements, I noticed. And so that included 10 fonts that were actually listed in brand guidelines, plus another 7 that weren't, and 32 colors over the years, shades of, but you get the idea. So therefore, my approach was to establish home. Where do we live, and how do we present ourselves? The challenge is to put fresh eyes on everything and simplify, in my view. So I went back home to home, which is the original logo, which was launched with the agency in 2003, and its original color. So we want to observe standard practices. We want to bring all of these elements into alignment, and we want to simplify. And that's what's my starting point to get this thing on the road. So as a conclusion to that little exercise, the summary is our corporate primary logo is going to return home to its original green. Our documents and digital and presentations are going to share more consistency, have a brand identity. GoZones has had a unique look to its marketing, and that is being tweaked to be more as a part of the family, and that's already underway. And TMC has a different color set, and they are going to be kept, but also part of the family. And we're going to be retiring some of the extra elements that we don't need. Some of the various graphic techniques and things like that, in favor of retiring the busy and pursuing a unified, consistent look. You saw an early version of that with a legislative agenda a few months ago. And that and our media passes gave us a foundation and how to move forward. So we're doing bus signs, we're doing, you see the brochure in front of you there that we've already talked about. And so this is our home now. And now we have a place to launch everything that we do and what we talk about. So that was step one. Next, we had to take on a strategic and planning mindset. In other words, keeping in mind who we are, what we do, who we serve, and how we serve. And so with those concepts in mind, we want to focus on bringing more attention and communication around our core transit modes. Been missing. Bringing more focus on the apps and ancillary services that we provide. Telling more stories about our people and our users and people who ride our system and people who work for our organization, giving us a sense of purpose and giving us a sense of community and a sense of fun. With that in concept, we then began to map out those ideas and pockets of ways that we could communicate and about which topics. And so we created what I call verticals, all the different core transit modes, the ancillary services, riders and people, community. We're mapping out exactly where we want to go with our communications channels. And then keeping in mind that the planning part of the mindset, we're now working in 3-month cycles on social media. We're working in year-long cycles on all of it. And we're working to create a calendar of things that help keep us relevant throughout the year. Nothing surprises us, right? And you want to be able to plan for communicating about everything that you offer. And so here's a quick look at our Teams planner in Microsoft Teams, where the whole department is working on various projects and tasks. We're doing social media plotting right now in Excel to map out calendars, and then we transfer that information into our Sprout Social for publishing. And so it gives you an idea of the 3-month and year-long planning cycles that we're already talking about that are sustainable and repeatable and constant. And then we populate the fiscal year calendar with all those various verticals and things mapped out over months over the course of the year. Again, repeatable, and we can add on and subtract as things come up. So keeping in mind all the channels that we have, the digital communications, website, blog, email, social media, all the various channels there, community relations, all of these things are informed by the way we talk about ourselves as a brand, and then the plotting that we're doing from a planning mindset. All of that gets informed and is approached in an organized way. Another really important thing is that we really have needed to use our channels properly. Give you an example. On the left here is what our Twitter feed looked like a year ago. There was an auto-populating of some of our messaging that was being sent over to Twitter, that all the various bus delays, this route's delayed and that, and it wasn't showing up well. And it, the images are lost, the links were lost, so that's what it looked like last year. On the right is what it looks like now. Photography, actual communication to a customer base that we know. Instagram. We weren't doing it right, frankly. Not a criticism, just an observation. This is telling your audience, I don't really want you here. When you're using graphics, Instagram's a photography channel. It's that simple. And so we have taken that and slowly turned that into more of a photography base, and we're hoping, and we're pretty confident that will grow as we go. Facebook. Another thing about real photography instead of clip art or any kind of things like that. So we have really taken an honest look and said, okay, this is how we have to transition in order to use these channels more effectively. And of course, through all of that, I don't want us to forget to have fun. We have to engage our audience in fun ways, like putting Barbie and Oppenheimer on a bus.
Yeah, that middle one's gotta go, but other than that.
Or landing the Millennium Falcon at the DDTC on May the 4th. So all those things to say to our audience, we're here, we hear you, and let's talk and have fun and let's engage with each other, okay? So the tactical execution of all of this strategic planning and mindset has been to show our pride in DCTA, who we are. So here's some examples of that. to also to honor our people and our customers. A couple of examples here. We went on a ride with Carl, the bus driver, and he was a big hit on social as he was taking us through the courthouse square. Very engaging driver. So those are the kind of people stories we are telling and will continue to tell, and we'll ramp that up as our staff comes fully online. We are honoring our communities. We make it a point to make sure we talk about the communities where we serve and how we serve them. So we've done that with all of the member cities, with UNT as our biggest partner, and we will continue to do that. And then we're going to communicate what we do, our accomplishments, you know, our big ridership growth, or our millionth completed ride under GoZone are two really good examples. So that's where we've been going. That's what we've been doing. We've kind of turned, and we're heading down a path that is, you know, well thought out, and we are going to continue to build on all of that. So our journey ahead, we are going to measure. We're measuring our success, and for now, but we weren't really doing them right. It's not really a fair comparison. So we're creating a baseline right now of where our audience is, and that'll give us a place of a starting point on where to grow in the coming years. So we're doing that through metrics on social. And then we're also going to be conducting customer satisfaction surveys here in the next couple of weeks, spilling into September, because we want to know what people think of the services that we provide. We want to know their opinion on the bus and on GoZone and on the A train. So we're going to be asking them that while they're on the train. Hey, what do you think of the ride? We're going to ask them that as soon as they get off their GoZone ride. The app is going to present them with a choice of, hey, would you like to take a survey? And we'll get really great information here in the next 6 to 8 weeks, and we'll pass that along. Our community relations team's doing great. Mary's awesome. She's been working on a few things with back to school in recent weeks with UNT, with the high school ISDs. Those green things mean we've already done them. We're going to revamp our community advisory committee. We hope to bring you a set of guidelines that we're going to redo. And we're targeting January 1 for that implementation. And then, of course, we're continuing our fall events and activities as normal. And we'll add on things as they come up. Some of our big milestones that we've achieved, we worked collectively with UNT and our bus ops people to get all of our campus shuttle communications back up online as the fall semester started, and that began in earnest this week. We are going to be talking about GoZone's 2nd anniversary coming up in a couple of weeks, a little press release and those kinds of things. September 15th, we're launching our state fair, our annual state fair campaign to do the combo deal where you buy a state fair ticket from us and we'll get you a regional pass to get you right to the gate. And then October 1, we're looking at potential announcements on how we did on ridership and perhaps our customer satisfaction survey. So we've got a lot of work ahead. You know, that's short term, and we're still looking at long term as well. And from a recruiting standpoint, I'm happy to say that we have a very, very good communication specialist who's been on board with us since May. Valeria is absolutely doing great. And we have made an offer, and the offer has been accepted for a new marketing specialist who, if all goes well, will have him in office on September 5th, the day after Labor Day. And we're working on hiring one more position that is our marketing business development specialist, who's going to help us launch our in-house advertising program and several other business development kinds of initiatives that we're working on. So all of that to say, been a lot of work, got a lot of work ahead of us. One last thing, we are working on recruitment materials. You have an example there on your desk as well, helping out with recruitment efforts from DCTA and NTMC. And we're happy to take part in all of those kinds of things. So with that, that's a quick review. I'll take any questions or comments.
I want to comment and say what a great job. And I really like the fact that y'all returning to a simpler look and the more traditional look that we've all come to appreciate and identify that brand identity. So great job. Great job.
Thanks. This was actually step one. This thing right here was actually step one. So, yeah.
And even your time, I mean.
Well,
that was not lost on me.
This is intentional. It's sort of it represents the give and take between green and blue. But we're in that transition period as we move back to green, and we'll see how far that goes. But I think green it gives you a very unique look in the marketplace. I think that when I worked for a different entity and they did a brand review that they spent a couple $1 million on, I learned that blue is in 80-something% of all corporate logos. So that's why they went with orange. Yeah. So we have strength in the green, and we'll continue to. It's also part of our own identity now.
So we'll be seeing these change to green.
Perhaps. I'm gonna give you a perhaps and stay tuned, because we're still assessing all of that. If we have printed stuff, we're not gonna throw it out.
Sure.
But we can certainly change all of the documents and presentations. We can change as needed, but there's no need to change everything, just some things.
Well, thank you.
We'll take it on step by step.
So two quick things. Number one, all of my campaign signs that I've ever had are green and white. So we're gonna keep rolling with green. I'm
Keep
good
on
with that.
trucking on that, yeah.
And number two, just if you're interested, September 8th is Star Trek Day. You'll just put that in your hopper.
Okay, Star Trek Day. I hear you and I see.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to commend David and Valeria and Mary. You know, it was more than a year ago that we cast a vision to rework what was called a public involvement and communication team into a marketing and communication team. And Mary has been doing the community engagement work faithfully for a long time. David brings a significant amount of expertise and has taken the bottom-up approach, building from the foundation and going upward, doing it the right way. And you saw in that recruitment slide, we've looked at a lot of resumes, interviewed a lot of people, and these are some of the most important jobs that we have to fill. And so we would rather wait for quality than hurry. And so we're looking forward to our September 3rd onboarding, and just appreciate all the work that you've been doing. So thank you, David.
Yeah. David, I did have one other thing on the events.
Yes.
I know we've really focused on Western Days, and I know that's typically a booth that we do. Over the last couple of years, we have moved the parade to the weekend before, which is the PBR rodeo. I don't know if that's hit your radar or not, and I don't remember if DCTA participated in the parade itself.
Okay.
So if that has not hit back here, I just want to let you guys know. I don't know what your plans are for participation.
Mary's watching and listening, and she hears you.
Awesome. No worries. No worries.
So we'll talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm not asking you to change what you do. I just don't know if what has changed what you guys do yet.
Okay.
So.
No, I think we're trying to keep as much of the long-range planning in place as possible and take on what new priorities need to be priorities. Perfect. If anybody wants any more of these cool UNT stickers, let me know.
All right, thank you.
We need a Louisville and Highland Village version of the bottom left sticker.
You got it. You got it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item 5. Item 6, discuss fiscal year 2024 Go Zone contract renewal and fiscal year 2023 performance. Javier.
Good morning, Board of Directors. Javier Churlo,
Maurice.
VP of Innovation and Information Technology here at DCTA. Today, I'll be kicking off a conversation about GoZone's fiscal year 2023 performance. And believe it or not, that encompasses GoZone's full second year of operation here for DCTA. In that light, we'll be talking about ridership, we'll be talking about service performance as it relates to KPIs, talking about safety performance and improvements over the course of the year, as well as other improvements to the service as well. In addition to that, we'll also be discussing the FY24 GoZone contract for the year 3 service for VIA to continue operating our GoZone service. And with that, I will start to pass the baton over to Maurice Bell, our Chief Operating Officer, who will be taking over the conversation as we bring the GoZone service under the side of information technology and innovation back over to operations. And with that, take over, Mel, and I'll be here off to the side helping out.
Thank you, Javier. Greetings, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I can't begin this without thanking Javier and the hard work that he's done with the launch of GoZone. We all know exactly how much work he's put into it. He's stepped outside of his role from an IT perspective and has really brought it to where it is today. So it's great for someone like myself coming in to be able to pick up where he left off. But again, he's not going anywhere. So we're gonna keep him engaged. So as you can tell, we are doing very well. GoZone continues to improve. We are still getting to the point of close to over 50 riders during the course of this fiscal year. We've seen a growth of 32% comparative to the second quarter of last year. And of course, our ridership itself for utilization continues to grow at roughly a little over 10%. So that's another strong point. Whoops, I guess I'm going backwards. And then looking at Denton's ridership, as you take a quick note at the top there, we're looking at the beginning of June 2022, where we implemented additional service in that period. The numbers still continue to do well. We do have our challenges, of course, when we had severe weather back in February of this year. And then, of course, seasonal trends that drop, but the flexibility and the growth continue to stay strong within the city of Denton. Now, Louisville. Louisville is probably one of the most unique because we see some real good numbers and it continues to maintain its steady peak. As you can see, the bullet point there in October of this year, where we ended up adding additional service. And as you can tell, we are doing real well, staying above 21,000 trips in that period during the course of this year. More specifically is the comparison of bus in February 2019 comparative to this year. You can see how well the service has taken off in that area. And it continues to improve. So that's definitely a positive to our customers, roughly an 80% increase in ridership and utilization. So it's doing very strong. Highland Village is no different. Matter of fact, in December of 2022, we added additional service there. And as you can see, it's continuing to grow. And right now we're over 938 trips in that area. So it's doing strong, another well-performing part of our service. Now for some performance KPIs, this is our seat unavailability. That is still maintaining very well. We had some peaks during some service issues, but we've dropped those numbers and are maintaining well into the single digits. But the goal is a 17.5, and we're staying well below that right now. So again, another good point. What's that?
That algorithm looks like it's getting dialed in.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The average wait time is at 24 minutes. We had a couple of peaks there in March of 2022 and in September of 22, but we have stayed below that and doing real well. Again, another key point, dialing it in. And here we are with safety incidents. That is probably one of the biggest points. Again, with this number of people that we're transporting in a given day, to see those numbers stay as low as they are, it's a testament to the service itself and the delivery and support by our contractor there. Now, these are some good safety points. We asked them to be able to try and get to 100% on the vehicles with drive cam units. They're at 95% at this point. Some of this, and the reason why it's not at 100 right now, is because of the transitioning out of other vehicles. As they replace vehicles due to the point they get to their useful life under their standards. Again, having a contractor come out and transfer that equipment as well as wrapping the vehicles, that's why they're maintaining a strong 95%. The other part, of course, is the ID cows to be able to identify exactly which vehicle they are. That is 100% rolled out. And then we have some other enhancements where they've implemented some notifications of major incidents, things that are actually providing some benefit to us and keeping us ahead of the curve with related to safety. Now, some of the other milestones, as we all know, we had the million riders back in March. We had a beautiful CEO delivering a wonderful certificate to one of our riders. And we actually rolled out also what riders can expect, basically the rider code of conduct for our passengers as well as for our operators. This is definitely paying some dividends for us. And it's a wonderful opportunity to show exactly what our customers can expect to see from us. And then, of course, the last part of the milestones is the final completion of the license plates to be Texas and not from somewhere else. So we can be proud and wave our flag up high. But this, again, this does speak to our local location, staying specific to who we are. And now we get into the contract part. This is where Javier Trillo is going to help out a little bit. He has been deeply involved in the negotiations of this piece. But right now, contractually, we are going to be maintaining what we've done in 2000 and or actually in this current year, moving into the third contract. The only difference, as you can see, is the hourly rate is going up a little bit as we've already negotiated. But one of the big pieces is the customer service portion. As you see here, we have two different pieces to it. It is broken up into two 6-month periods. This gives us the flexibility to monitor exactly and take a look at other ways of providing the customer service. We definitely want to enhance this piece. We recognize that it is something that that our ridership is paying attention to, and we want to be able to deliver a better customer service side of things. So this is a strong evaluation process. That is the dollar amount associated, which is $560,000 in customer service costs in order to provide that. But again, breaking this up into two 6-month periods allows us the opportunity to do our evaluations and make changes where we need to. So with that, if you have any questions.
Questions? Maurice?
Just a quick comment, say thanks to Javier again and Mo for their work on this presentation. This represents a big step in our organization of putting the right functions in the right places to have our Go Zone operation in the same organization under our chief operating officer as our bus service and our rail service. That is how we integrate and work together across modes. And so appreciate these two gentlemen working so closely together to get us to this point. The reason this briefing is on the agenda is because next month, with this budget now approved, we will ask you all to approve the year 3 of the Go Zone contract. My intent is to put it on the consent agenda, and I'll take feedback to the contrary if there is any. But it's also important to note this would be year 3 of a 4-year contract with VIA. And so we have to begin the work this fiscal year of thinking about what comes next for after year 4 of the VIA contract. And of course, your work or your support last month in the approval of the Spare Labs contract helps us to begin evaluating all of our options. So thank you all very much. Both of you.
That's it. Thank you. Item 7 is local and regional updates, legislative issues. We already had a briefing by Randy and Drew earlier today on legislative issues. Myself and Paul Christina, we met with Jeff Polcher from Congressman Burge's office. It was a very, very good meeting. It was basically just to get to know him. He gave us a little bit of insight on the congressional process and the budget process, which he says it's going to be just he said, just get your popcorn. It's going to be a lot of fun. So he said it's as the case may be. As he understands it, the president's going to want to have more funds for the war in Ukraine. And it's going to be tied into relief for Maui. So that will be interesting how that's being played. We talked about expanding services. He wanted to know what we're doing with Collin County. We explained the work we're doing with McKinney and I can't remember the other 2 cities we talked about. He did mention that he heard from Gainesville up in Cooks County that they're interested in transit. So we appreciate that. We said, we're not really asking for anything right now. We did talk about the positive train control issue and the waiver with FRA, and he offered, anything the congressman can do, he'd be willing to help us with that. Say anything else you want to add, Paul?
No, sir. That's it.
Okay. That's all I had on my end.
So we held the RTC meeting on August 10th. And one of the things that we were able to congratulate DART for its 40 years of service. I mean, it doesn't even seem real, 40 years. I have kids that are 40s. And so August 16th was their celebration of that. So some of the agenda items that we discussed kind of related to DCTA is the changing mobility. So the data insights and delivering, continuing to deliver innovative projects during COVID. So combined, there's 32% below COG's pre-COVID baseline that DCTA will likely exceed in fiscal year 2019. Total ridership in fiscal year 2023. The Unified Transportation Program and Regional 10-Year Plan. They were seeking approval for this for updating the region's 2024 Unified Transportation Program. That's required by Texas HB 20. The UTP is a 10-year performance-based planning and selection program which prioritizes selected by the MPO, TxDOT District, and Texas Transportation of Commission. And it's updated annually. Ratification of transportation improvement. COG is requesting RTC approval for 6 tip modifications brought by TxDOT to move projects to 23-26 to advance projects from fiscal year 2027 and later. So that was discussed. The Census Bureau, the Urban Boundary Federal Transit Administration designated recipient selection and Metropolitan Planning Organization designated status. So the U.S. Department of Transportation uses decennial consensus to identify new and allocating federal funds associated with multiple state and regional assistance programs. So the 2020 census modified the prior McKinney urbanized area to create now the McKinney-Frisco urbanized area. Staff was asking that COG serve as the designated recipient for the urban formula funds and that COG and RTC continue to serve as the MPO for the new McKinney-Frisco urbanized area. On December 29th of 22, the Census Bureau published updates to urban areas based on 2020 census of population and housing counts and density calculations. So based on the 2010 census, there are 3 urbanized areas in the DFW region. That's the Dallas-Fort Worth, Arlington, Denton, Louisville, and McKinney. But under the new 2020 designation, Frisco is being combined with McKinney to create the McKinney-Frisco urbanized area, which requires designation of a new designated recipient for funds. So COG staff was recommending that they serve as a designated recipient for those. And it's important because DCTA provides services to Frisco, which is now part of 3 different funding source areas. The DFW, the expanded McKinney, Frisco, UZA, and rural. We talked about intermodal transportation hubs for colleges and universities. So it was important because this study was requested by DCTA through a proposal for fiscal year 2020-2021 Unified Planning Work Program. So last week, DCTA staff introduced UNT's new Director of Transportation and Parking to the study and is looking forward to working alongside UNT to develop enhanced facilities guided by principles established in the study. And last, the Metropolitan Plan Policy. The policy bundle helps achieve mobility 2045 goals for incentivizing adoption of forward-thinking strategy, solutions by local agencies. DCTA staff successfully documented that we have 7 policies currently in place to support the Mobility 2045 goals, and we were awarded $1 million in transportation development credits. Yay. And last, I'm sorry, I thought that was the last one, but I do want to bring this up. High-speed rail. So the Texas Central and Amtrak are now working together to explore the high-speed rail service opportunities between Dallas and Houston. So that'll be interesting to see how they work together through that. And that's it, Mr. Chair.
Just a couple of quick ones. We did get notified from DART earlier this week that the DART board approved their extension of the Collin County Rides program through February the 1st. So that means we are targeting, assuming if agreements can be done, we would assume those services on February the 1st of next year. That gives us the runway that we were asking for in order to be able to implement our technology and all that sort of stuff. Javier and Maurice hosted the folks from Spare Labs yesterday, and that process is on track. And then the other note is that several of you at your place received a copy of a letter that is being sent to your appointing entities, appointed you to the board of directors to DCTA. We have a few of you with terms that are coming up, and so just be aware that your appointing bodies are getting that correspondence, and we'll wait to hear the response from that. So that's all I have, sir.
Information reports, you have the July 2023 safety, service and ridership reports. You get an update on the interim service plan. That's provided you as a briefing. It's going to come back for the board's action in September. Also in September, we're going to have officer elections. And we'll have memo on updated fare policy. That's moving forward. And then the fifth item is kind of was already talked about a little bit. The way the memo reads, Diane will be contacting each one of you to find out of your availability for January 2024.
Keisha? I think
So,
Keisha's gonna reach out.
What?
So
Okay, can we talk about
I
this
read the
later?
DCTA board secretary will be in touch, so. Okay, no worries, a typo.
Y'all just put me wherever you want me. I don't care.
Good, I was wondering how that was good. I'm glad I said it. It's all right, okay. Okay, so excellent. We'll get, someone will talk to us. That concludes the informational reports, future agenda items, and board member requests. Do we have any? Otherwise, the next regular board of directors meeting is September 28th, 2023. Next item is reports on item of community interest. That's pursuant to Texas Government Section 551.0415. The board of directors may report on the following items: express thanks, congratulations, or condolences, information about holiday schedules, recognition of individuals, reminder about upcoming DCTA and member city events, information about the community events, and announcements involving imminent threat to public health and safety. I'll start by asking, Judge, do you have anything to report? No. Ms. McGuire? Vice Chair? You? Okay. Sure. Okay. The next item is to convene executive session. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.074, personnel matters, the board of directors will convene into closed executive session to deliberate the duties and performance of the chief executive officer, fiscal year 2023 performance evaluation. So we will convene into executive session at 1:07 p.m. And that will be voting members and the alternates. Good afternoon. It is 1:53. And there are no items to act on from our executive session. So at this point, we will now adjourn our regular meeting at 1:54 PM. Thank you.